series on the Nico Penguin YouTube channel, Facebook page, Twitch, for productive gamers by a gamer with your host, Nico Penguin. And today we have an Amazon and Audible best-selling author, Chris Philbrook, in the building. Chris, thank you so much for being here today.
I am stoked to be here today.
And I appreciate the fact that you took time out of your busy schedule as a best-selling author to come and just talk not too much about books, but actually about video games.
It's nice to have a pleasant break, an interlude to talk about interesting things rather than, the same old, same old.
Oh, yes. So tell me, how did you end up in the gaming industry? Because I'd heard that you used to work or you currently work in the gaming industry.
Yeah, so I went to a convention back in like 1998 or 99, and
Mhm.
I got a demo of a game by the vice president of WizKids Games at the time, Ray. And I loved the game that he showed me, and it wasn't out yet, and I was really enthusiastic
Mhm.
and say, "Hey, hey, can I have your card? I want to follow up, keep me in the loop," and just like fanboyed all over this guy.
Yeah, yeah.
And in the months leading up to the game's release, I like joined forums and was like, just getting really excited about the game. And when it came out, I wound up getting the attention of some of the the in-company playtesters who watched the forums and saw everybody interacting and talking about the game. And
Oh, wow.
I showed enough insight about the game that the one of the playtesters, a guy named Ian, was like, "Hey, do you want in?" And I was like, what?" you know And I mean, I still remember like that feeling. And the guy was like, "Look, like we need more playtesters. The game is a hit, and we want you to at least help a little bit. Would you be willing?"
Mhm,
And I was
mhm.
like, "Yeah, of course. This is literally my life stream to like be a
Right?
part of game production." And that's how it started. And I worked as a playtester for I don't know 3 to 6 months, developing like tabletop stuff and like the mechanics behind how game systems work, like the math and the structures. And after that, they started a new product line, a new game that they were working on.
Mhm.
And they said, "Hey, do you want to be like a bigger part of this new game?"
Interesting.
Yeah, of course I do. Like, don't assume the answer is yes. And I was brought on board as like the senior playtest manager of that game, and I wound up being the rules arbitrator for that game, which is a game called Mage Knight. And the specific one was Mage Knight Dungeons. And I was basically the guy who decided if a rule worked and if a system was
Mm.
broken or needed to be fixed. And I got the final say on any of the characters and their stats that showed up in the game and said, "All right,
Oh, snap.
this is balanced, this is broken, this needs a tweak, whatever."
Oh, snap.
Um, and I did that for years. I did that for 3 or 4 years, and that's actually how I started writing, because they had
Mm.
us submit little bits to like show up on the website,
Yeah, yeah.
like quotes of the characters and like interactions between characters and like the lead into a new scenario or a battle that was coming up or whatever. And that's how I started writing, because they started to pick more and more of the little pieces I
Yeah,
submitted, and
yeah,
before
yeah.
you know it, I was writing half the time. And fast forward years later, I wound up getting laid off because the company got bought out.
Mhm.
But I started writing, and now I write books for a living. So, yay, happy ending.
Wow, that is it's so interesting. So, because you were constantly, like, on the forums, you were, consistent in posting and liking and whatnot, like, was there, like, some sort of, like, a ladder or ranking where they could see, or they just literally every post or whatever, they would just see you on there?
They just saw my activity. Like, one of the best ways for game developers to get true feedback is to just sort of like skulk in the background of forums. And like
Mhm,
nowadays it would be Reddit or Facebook groups or Twitter threads or whatever.
mhm,
And they just anonymously watch through secondhand accounts, and they see all of these unbiased, completely frank opinions, and
mhm,
they see intelligent people who play these games
right.
talking about the game, and you'd be shocked at how many times you can go through something in a game and it looks absolutely perfect to you and everybody on the team, and then
Mhm.
15 minutes after release, some kid in Utah who, you know, sees the light of day once a month because he's a Mormon was like, hey, did you guys know that this is actually wrong? And you're like, and like then you're scrambling to make a fix, you know.
Right, right.
And I mean, that happens. It doesn't matter how much work or how many eyes you put on it. Occasionally something happens where there's an interaction that, you know, didn't get flagged or didn't get noticed. So yeah, like they just saw me. They just saw me interacting. They saw me talking theory. They saw me talking, you know, unconsciously I was talking about the balance of
Mhm,
things,
mhm.
you know, like, hey, well, that only makes sense
Oh.
because of this. And if this changes, then
Oh.
that throws that out of whack. So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
somehow showed them a deeper understanding of, you know, the balance of their seesaw. So,
So
and
you were
you know,
really
just staying at it.
theoretical before you were on as the balancer?
Hmm. Yep. I mean, I think that's what distinguishes a lot of really high level gamers. They see that next level, you know,
Hmm.
that like, okay, I'm having fun and this is great. And I have this awesome thing that I saw on YouTube to equip to my character. And I'm running the best list of, you know, whatever game that you're, you know, trying to play. And then
Mhm.
there's that next level of people that see those interactions and they see the theory and they're looking, you know, that extra step or two down the line. It's like chess players, right? Like
Yes, yes.
I'm a game developer. I can't play chess worth a shit.
What?
I can't. I just can't. There's too many options. There's too many things to go down the line, and I can't hold more than like 3 or 4 moves in my head at a time
Mhm.
because my brain's just going too fast, right? So
Right, right.
once I run out of my 3 or 4 moves, if the person I'm playing is still 3 or 4 moves ahead, they got me. Game over, done, right? So I suck at chess, but I'm really good at the theory of it, right?
Mm.
Like I could talk about it all day and sound intelligent, but I'm awful at the game. Awful.
Oh my goodness. Well, that's so intriguing that your start to game development came as a fan, not as somebody that
Yep.
submitted an application. So would it be safe to say that you pretty much got scouted based off of your intelligence?
I mean, I think that that would be a way to describe it that sounds nice. I think I was vocal and consistent and had enough good ideas that they rolled the dice on me, you know?
And then you said that they got you in as like a play tester?
Mhm. Yep. Yeah, as a volunteer, initially, the first, I don't know, 3 months or so, just like they would send me stuff to just, you know, look at and numbers and sort of like, "Hey, what do you think about this idea for the game?" And then it just grew and grew and grew, and it got to the point where it's like, all right, well, you're doing enough work for us that we have to like pay you now. And that was just like a dream come true. Like I remember the first time I got a check,
Yeah, yeah,
and it
yeah.
was just like,
Oh, how did that feel?
man, it was a trip. It was a trip. I've been a gamer my whole life. You know, I was playing games when I was like 8 or 9. So like to have that suddenly be something that I could do and say, hey guys, guess what? I'm a game developer. You know, and I never achieved like massive, you know, high levels of renown or recognition, and nobody knows
Mhm.
my name, and most of the games that I worked on, you know, aren't available anymore and weren't gigantic hits, but still it was awesome.
Yeah, that's an epic feeling. I wish I could feel that. So you gotta explain it to me. Now, when you said that because you kept developing the balancing so much and you did it to the point where you pretty much were creating the game lore,
Mhm.
and, from little small itty bitty codes to, I would assume you were probably being asked to do much more lore. Now, did that give you the idea to be an author after you
Mhm.
like got bought out, or during the time where you were creating the lore, you would just write on your free time and be like, "Hey, if I'm doing this for this character for this game, can I do it for myself?"
You know, both really. I one of my old school loves, like going back to middle school, was Dungeons and Dragons, right? So, you know, I
Mhm.
grew up in a fairly small town, and I had just a few friends, and we were all super into D&D, and we just told stories, you know, like, you know, D&D around the table is just like it's collaborative storytelling, right? And when I got into the position where I could tell stories in the game, right? It's just that next extension. Instead of telling stories to my friends sitting around a table rolling dice and eating, Doritos and Mountain Dew or whatever, I was just telling those stories to people online, or people who are reading the back of a rule book, or people who saw an on-screen message. So, it was that next level. And then once I realized that I had just a little bit of writing chops, like enough that the company I worked for published, my writing,
Mhm.
it kind of opened my eyes to the idea of like, hey, you know what, dude? Like maybe if you really applied yourself to this writing thing, not the game development thing, but the writing thing,
Mhm.
you might be talented enough to pull something off. So it
Hmm.
was kind of a natural extension where imposter syndrome is a real thing, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah.
it doesn't matter how many books I sell or how many podcasts I'm on or how many autographs I sign. I am always a no talent hack that is just barely clinging to success, right?
Hmm.
And having that little bit of confidence built through those little steps, starting out as a game development volunteer, and then
Mhm.
working my way up to bigger positions, and actually having final decisions, and then having stuff published, and those little incremental steps gave me enough courage to just keep reaching out and exposing myself and taking that risk, because
Hmm.
I'm not a code guy. I don't have that skill set, but
Yeah.
I am a balance guy, and I'm a story guy,
Mhm.
and I can create a universe and then quantify it with a system. What numbers are good, what numbers are bad, and so on. And then I hand that off to, if it's for a video game, it would go, to the coding people who then say,
Mhm.
okay, well, how do we create a game around this structure? Um, so I don't have the paycheck of a software engineer, right?
Mhm.
Um, but I love it, like I'm incredibly grateful for the time that I had working in game development, and I still moonlight here and there helping some people now and then with questions they have, but nothing huge. But it's been a privilege.
Wow, that's so interesting. And do you like the fact that because you started off with the game development and you transitioned to being an author, do you feel like because you were allowed almost to be a gamer for just a couple of years more, it really assisted in your pursuit of becoming an author?
I would say so. Yeah, that's a pretty um, fair connection to make. I talk I've been talking more about it in the last year or so, but I have pretty severe ADHD. And it was undiagnosed the vast majority of my life, and it wasn't until about a year ago that
Mhm.
one of my mental health professionals was like, have you ever considered? And all of a sudden, like, all of these things just started to make sense.
Yeah, yeah.
And one of the things about ADHD brain chemistry
Mhm.
is dopamine, the feel good chemical, right?
Mhm.
Normal brains make it all the time, right?
Mhm.
So you always have like a general level of well-being and happiness and satisfaction, and you get jumps of it from like doing things around the house, and you feel good
Yeah,
when
yeah, yeah.
tasks are accomplished. ADHD brains don't do that.
Hmm.
The only way they can make dopamine is to engage in a task that gives them satisfaction or
Hmm.
stimulates them, right? It
Right,
doesn't even have to
right,
be entertaining, it just has to be stimulating,
right,
which is why you see people with ADHD, their leg is going like this under the table, it's going like crazy because that motion releases dopamine, right?
right.
And earlier in life, I got so much of my dopamine from games,
Mhm, mhm.
from gaming, and I could plug myself into a game for hours on end, and it calmed my brain down. It
Right,
slowed me down, it
right.
kept me focused, and it gave me, peace of mind. And the thing is I would play for a few hours, right? And then be able to ride that dopamine high for a few more hours. So
Hmm.
then, I'd turn off my, PlayStation, or I'd turn off my Super Nintendo, and I'd be good to go to like do stuff around the house for hours. I could do my homework, I could bust out XYZ, and that ability to like plug in and let my brain kind of level out really allowed me to be as successful in life as I've been able to be. So for that, gaming has just been, a big deal for me.
Wow. How did you figure out that sounds like such an effective hack.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, so you would game and then knowingly that your brain is still getting stimulated from the concept of playing, you would go and do the things that you needed to do?
It was unconscious at the time, like 13-year-old Chris who was, busting out, Final Fantasy, after school, didn't understand that he was unconsciously hacking his brain to get it to function. Looking back
Mm.
on it 25 years later, it's like, oh my God, like totally. Like I was absolutely hacking the system to get my brain to function. And I still do it today, right? Like I have games I play on my phone, and when I'm like a little down or whatever, like I just stop, I
Mhm.
fire up the game, I play for 5 minutes, I unlock a quest, or I bust out a head-to-head PvP
Ooh,
match in whatever game I'm playing,
okay,
and I get that
okay.
spike, and then I put my phone down, and I'm like, all right, cool, and I go right back to work.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
which is also why I could never work an assembly line, right? Like I
Yeah,
could
yeah.
never sit there and just do with the same thing over and over. My brain would literally drive me off a cliff. And gaming, especially, the way I just described how I use it, really keeps my brain kind of level. Because you just can't take a Ritalin every 5 minutes, otherwise your heart will explode.
Oof,
But
oof. No, you said it. Now, before we continue, I do wanna give everybody the opportunity to hear where they can follow you, like you, support you as a indie author, so that way, this is not just something that you verbalize, but they actually provide some support to you.
Oh, yeah, I appreciate it. So, if anyone is new watching that isn't familiar with my work, I mostly well known for writing in the post-apocalyptic genre. That's the series that kind of gave me the career that I have, and I have a big footprint on Facebook. So if you go to Facebook and you just drop in Philbrook author, you'll get all of my pages and whatnot. And then I'm also on Twitter, same thing, Philbrook author. If you go to Amazon or Barnes and Noble or wherever you buy your books online and just plot my name in, all of my stuff will show up. And then you can always find me on my website, which is thechrisphilbrook.com, because somebody bought chrisphilbrook.com. So
We'll stick to the
awkward.
Chris Philbrook. No worries,
Right.
no worries. Okay, so back to our regularly scheduled program. You did mention quite a few video game systems, and I have to ask,
Mhm,
which
mhm.
is your favorite? And if you have a hard time clarifying, the one that you spent the most time playing.
Oh boy. In terms of raw hours, PC. I for many, many years I was an MMO guy,
Ooh,
and
solid choice, solid choice.
I couldn't even tell you how many hours I've sunk into MMOs during my lifetime. So that, and then after that, I kind of realized that MMOs and playing on my computer was a big trap, because if I was working on my computer, it became very, very easy for me to minimize and then fire up, whatever game I was obsessed with, and then
Right,
I
right,
I can lose track of time so easily. So instead of, playing for 2 minutes and getting that rush, I would play for 20 and then realize, "Oh, I didn't get anything done today."
right.
So I don't do any PC gaming anymore at all, because I have to have that boundary, because I'm a guy who sits at his computer all day.
Mhm, mhm.
But when I'm able to, I'm a PlayStation guy. So
Mm.
not because I have any particular loyalty to it, but my friends growing up, we originally had like Super Nintendo, Nintendo 64, and that stuff, and then we had one friend who got the original PlayStation, and it just felt like the next level of experiences, and all of us became obsessed with PlayStation simultaneously, and we all asked for them for Christmas or our birthdays, and after a year or two we all managed to either save up or get them as gifts. So my little core group of dudes is mostly PlayStation, and I've just stayed PlayStation ever since.
And, do you have a specific or favorite game on each, console of either the PC or PlayStation that is just the number one, either the favorite one or the one that you put in the most hours in that you just can't get it out of your heart and mind and soul?
The Borderlands franchise, I
Ooh, okay.
man, that game speaks to me. I don't know why. It's funny, it gets me laughing, the quests are interesting. I love, like, the fact that you can, like, run loot, and it's, like, a little MMO-ish, and you have some
Yes,
character,
yes,
like, it
yes.
everything about it just, like, appeals to me. It scratches every gaming itch I have. But
Yeah,
I also
yeah.
I also really dig stuff like Assassin's Creed,
Mm.
especially Origins was really, really good, and Odyssey I really liked as well. Fallout, like I love 3 and 4. Those are both, I mean, I put a lot of time into those 2 games. And, just like some of the generic shooters are really fun. I'm not a Call of Duty guy. I don't like to do online, matchmaking shooter games, mainly because I want to be able to save and walk away, right? Like, and when I'm in a
Oh.
match, and if my kid starts crying or whatever, like
Mhm.
I just want to be able to set the controller down and walk away. So I try and stay away from like the live games where I'm interacting with people one on one. But that's being a parent, though,
No, that's actually a pretty solid reason. I just don't play it because I suck.
Well,
I
there's that too.
I just suck. I can't. Give me a MMO, a good storyline, and some friends, and
Yeah,
we'll tackle this boss together.
right.
PvP, completely different realm. Completely
Yeah.
different realm.
And I have friends who are obsessed with PvP. Like, I got a buddy, he's a doctor. He's a friend of mine who's a doctor. And in his spare time, he does raids on WoW. And
Oh
he
wow.
he literally lives for PvP. Like he's on a PvP server
Oh
and
my
he just
goodness.
runs around ganking people all night long and then talks smack about it the next day. And it's like, dude, you're a doctor, man. Like you're supposed to heal. You took an oath, and but he loves it,
Yo.
but that's the beauty of all these
Oh
games. There's
man.
something to appeal for all different kinds of personalities.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Oh my goodness. You threw me for a loop there. Man, the doctor is out here slaying when he needs to be saving. Oh my goodness.
seriously, he's not even a healer, right? I mean, I guess that's role playing for you, right? Like do what you're not in real life.
Oh, that's actually pretty cool. That's his escapism of real life. Instead of healing, he's slaying
He's just running around shanking people.
and looting them and taking them. Oh, wow, that's pretty interesting. Now in regards to your writing, because I do want to at least touch base on it.
Hmm.
Just a little bit, because I love playing video games. We could talk about video games all night, honestly. But in regards to your writing, so you started off your writing career from gaming, which is
Hmm.
not something that happens all the time. Starting pretty much from basic here and there lore, quotes, sayings, storylines. I would just a quick pause. Did you ever have to, like, create, like, siblings and families too when you were gaming? When you were creating the game stories?
Oh yeah, yeah, completely.
How did
We
you do that? 'Cause that sounds so complicated.
sometimes it is. Sometimes it's really easy. A lot of times, like we would have like a scenario would be, every 3 months or so, we'd release a new block of characters for the game, right?
Mm,
So,
mhm.
we would sit down and look at the meta, the current available characters, figures, whatever
Yeah, yeah.
available to, the player base and the formats that we were promoting or whatever. And then we would look at that and say, okay, well, we need to introduce more of these kinds of characters, more of these
Mhm,
kinds of characters. We need to introduce a balance for this character type because that one's kind of running amok right now. So, once we figured out what we needed, then it was like, all right, well, what's the story we're going to tell with these guys? Are they themed? Are they a faction? Are they allies? Are they, whatever? And then once you kind of like narrow down those like kind of broad strokes, then
mhm.
you can like throw in fun stuff. So the game that I primarily worked on was like a fantasy setting, but it was now we would call it steampunk because there's like steam powered robots running around and they
Mhm,
had black powder guns, but there was also like magic and elementals and tree ants and stuff like that. But once you had those broad strokes, you could pull all those different things. And because we organized things into factions, we had a story bible that if they belonged to a faction, these were
yeah,
like
yeah.
the 5 things that they must have. These are the 5 things they must not have. And then
Ooh,
it's like a framework, right? So you
yes.
have like a recipe and then you see all those things that get auto filled in for you. And then what's left over is actually fairly easy to come up with. Coming up with the actual story beyond that is pretty straightforward. So like we had a little release, like a holiday release that was like, I think it was six characters.
Mhm,
And I wrote an adventure that featured all of those characters.
mhm,
And then I developed the characters based on the story for the adventure, the
mhm.
setup. Like I wrote the setup, and then you bought the people, as a package, and then
Yeah,
had
yeah,
all
yeah.
of them to use as resources to play in the story that I set up. And yeah, I literally just got to write them all. so I got to write the backstory and the history and the names for all of those characters for that release, and all of that was in the story, and then the players got to play and have a natural evolution of that experience. And that was really super fun because I had carte blanche to basically do whatever I wanted. But when you're interacting with a bunch of different people, and there's like
Mhm.
branding involved, and you have to make sure that you're not copying anything else, and then the legal
Mhm.
department jumps in, and you got to like make sure that what you
Uh-oh.
did, it hasn't already been done. And you'd be shocked how many names have already been used. And if you name a wizard, Gandalf or something, you're gonna get a call from a lawyer. Like it's just the way it is.
Yeah, yeah.
So, you got to be a little creative, and when there's money at stake, you have to be, you have to avoid litigious companies.
Hmm.
But then, that's the business. So,
And then when you transition into doing it for yourself for creative writing purposes, did that pretty much foundation of how to do it and all
mhm,
those things that you must do in order to make it make sense and things that you must
mhm.
not do, did that enable you to almost again, like almost cheat your way into already like, I already know how to do this?
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. I was doing this in the late '90s and 2000s, in the gaming end of it, and we kept everything organized. I was at the cusp of when we went from Excel to building databases, like
Mhm,
Access databases, to keep all of our story, together. And then we had like private servers that the company could access that had all of the information. You could see all the revision notes and stuff like that. So
mhm.
I watched the technology um, kind of go from everyone just has a document on their computer that we
Yeah,
occasionally
yeah.
update and then send out to everybody, to we're all doing changes to the server that everyone can see, and everyone can see who made what changes, and every iteration is recorded and whatnot. Having that structure of learning how to organize information helps me as a writer, because
Mhm.
when I'm trying to keep the continuity of my own stories, I'm organized, right?
Yes.
So I naturally fall into that habit of structuring all of my facts to keep pretty much everything in line. And I still make mistakes occasionally. I forget that a character got a finger shot off, or whatever. But it has given me a foundational skill set that I'm able to build with, and create a career. So,
And what do you think would be the number one lesson that you've learned either as an author or as a gamer that has enabled you to be as successful as you are today?
man, the number one skill, um,
No, the
it's
number one lesson
oh,
that
the
you've
number one
learned.
lesson. Oh, that's
Mhm.
that's much easier. Persistence.
Ooh.
Persistence. It solves almost every problem. And people who fail are often the people who lose hope, because they're not willing to take that one more try, right? And
Ooh, you spitting.
game development and anything creative, like
Mhm,
anything creative, you're a painter, you're a music artist, whatever, a writer, you are going to meet rejection and failure constantly,
hmm,
constantly. No matter what level
mhm,
you reach professionally, there will always be people who hate what you do,
mm,
and by extension, don't like you for whatever reason. They apply the
right,
work you do to your personality. Like, some of the reviews for my books literally say that I'm mentally disturbed and should seek mental health counseling. And like, these people don't know me, right? Like,
right.
they read a book about a story that's fictional with fictional characters, and they think I'm the crazy people, right? So, all right,
Oh,
pump the
man.
brakes on that one. But at the end of the day, it's persistence.
Mm,
And like, dial it all the way back to the fat Chris sitting on the side of his bed in ninth grade, who's tried to kill the boss at the end of a video game for the 35th try, and you get him on the 36th try,
hmm,
right?
mhm,
And the payoff of that success is sweeter, I would say, than if you just got it on the first try. Right? Because like, you
mhm.
you went through it, you tried, you tested yourself,
Yes.
you used different ideas, you adjusted your character, you came at it with a different strategy, whatever, and you go through all those iterations of failure, and then at the end, you have that success, right? And that accomplishment is, I mean, that's the dopamine that I'm talking about, right?
Mhm, mhm.
And writing is no different. You know, you just keep trying, you keep trying, and you keep trying. And that's like the difference. I mean, I think that's something that I learned, you know, that persistence is the only thing that always solves problems. No matter what, as long as you keep at it, you have a chance
And that
to.
just makes me think of, what would you say was the biggest, or is the biggest hurdle that you've had to overcome with your persistent, that other than that 36th try at the boss that gave you that amazing sensation, like, "I'm glad I
Yeah,
didn't give up." What's that
seriously.
number 1
Yeah.
challenge?
The number one challenge, I mean, the cheesy answer is staying persistent
Ooh.
and not allowing myself to get frustrated with
Mhm,
failure, you know, and reminding myself that failures and rejection are part of the process. It's a natural part of the process. And it's really hard sometimes to not get down. You know, if I have a couple of failures in a row, or if, you know, I get a bunch of, you know, untimely criticism, or, you know, I get bad news from two completely unrelated things, you know, in a short amount of time, it's really easy to get, you know, down.
mhm,
And when you're talking about writing books or doing anything in media, you know,
mhm,
movies, TV, video games, whatever, you hear no 10 times more than you hear yes.
mm.
And you have to get through those no's sometimes. And it's really tough to keep your chin up, and it's really tough to stay persistent. And I mean, it's a struggle now. Like, I am by any measure a wildly successful author, and some days it's hard. You know,
Right,
it's
right.
like, man, why do I do this? Like, why do I put myself through this? And I mean, I remember when I was working in game development, a lot of it, I mean, I rode the high for that for a long time, but then it got to the point where it's like, all right, that thing I put out, you know, the people didn't like these 4 things I worked on, and people
Mhm.
kind of, you know, trashed that little short story I wrote. And am I good at this? And, you know, is this something I'm actually good at? Like, maybe I'm not, you know, and you doubt yourself. But at the end of the day, if you stay persistent and, yeah, consistent, you will yield results, especially if you're flexible enough to try new things and adjust and keep an open mind.
Wow,
But that's
that's
hard.
actually,
That's hard. It's just
no,
hard.
yeah, yeah. Wow, what is the non-cheesy answer, if you have one? If you have one, if not, we can move on.
It's a great question. Um, budgeting, like the financial stress of being an entrepreneur is, you know, everyone talks about how hard it is to run your own business.
Mhm,
And that, you know, that's what I do. I'm a writer. My business is writing books, and then trying to get them published, and then promoting them, and filling orders, and, you know, booking appearances, and, you know, doing shows like this. And this
mhm.
is my job. This is what I do. And I'm the guy who's responsible for managing all of it. So, you know, I don't have an
Mm,
assistant. I don't have an aide. I have some people who are very helpful. I have people who, you know, volunteer to mod my fan club, and so on. But the financial strain
mhm,
of trying to keep all of those balls in the air can sometimes become very, very stressful.
mhm.
Because again, it's just me. And, you know,
Right,
like I
right.
said, with failures, like, if I write a dud, if I write a book and I sink 6 months into creating a title that nobody buys and gets bad reviews, well, I worked for 6 months
Right.
for nothing.
Mhm.
You know, if it doesn't sell, I don't get money, you know. Yeah, unless I sold the rights to a publisher, which happens. But again, like, that's, I mean, it's like demoralizing, man.
Right,
Like,
right.
you know, what if you went to work for 6 months and they're like, you know, actually, we said we were going to pay you, but it turns
Uh-oh.
out we're not. But you got to
Oh,
keep at
no.
it. You got to keep
Right.
at it. And in another 6 months, theoretically, we'll pay you again. So, you know, but being persistent, and being able to look back on, my track record of actual success, and say, all right, you know, dude, you can do this. Like, you have the skill set. Take the time, put the work in, do the stuff you know you're good at, and it'll be okay, you know? And also not being a dick, I think helps, right? Like, but who
To
knows?
like who to your family, your fans?
Both, like I have to be a good dad and a good husband here at home, but treating my fans with respect and
Mhm.
showing gratitude is a really big thing for me because everybody who buys one of my books like that matters.
Right.
Like I'm not these juggernaut authors that have massive 6 7 figure deals with the big
Yes.
publishing houses. Like I have to hustle, I work,
Mhm, mhm.
and I never got a silver spoon. I haven't got a golden parachute. Like I'm not wealthy by any stretch of the imagination. I live okay, and I have to be financially stable and I have a good life and we make ends meet. But every book that sells matters to me.
Mhm,
That
mhm.
matters to me. Like you took $5 out of your pocket and said, "I liked what you made. You take this $5." And like that's a big deal.
Right.
Like I get it. Money's tight. People bust their butts. They go to work at jobs they don't like, and when
Mhm.
they part with that money, and if it comes to me, that matters. Like I
Right.
feel that's $5 more I have for my family, and making sure that I show that gratitude and that I stay connected with those people who support my writing. Like that is something that intrinsically as a human being, I don't think I could ever not do. Um, and I think it's important. I think it's also why I've been able to hold on to fans for so long. Like, I mean, I
Mhm.
have people who started with me 12 years ago when I first started publishing that I still talk to on a regular basis that were there
Oh,
for the
wow.
very first few days. And that's important and it feels good, you know? It's that community. It's like you were saying, like when you play MMOs and like, you get a good storyline, you got some friends, it's good. Like that's good, right?
Yeah.
That's enough. And and it's fulfilling and it's satisfying. And for me as a writer, it's the same thing, right? Like I'm telling my stories. I got my few friends out there who the most I've never even met that read my books and then check back in with me after and like, dude, I love this thing. Oh, I can't believe you killed this person. Like I get that camaraderie, I get that family, and that fills my cup.
Would you say that's your favorite part of the writing process, or is there a different part?
It's definitely something that I get jazzed over. I love doing in-person events, like conventions or panels or meet and greets or signings or whatever, because writing is an inherently lonely process.
Yeah.
I sit at my desk, however many hours a day I can manage, and it's just me. Like
Mhm.
I don't get to turn around and ask the guy in the cubicle next to me whether or not we want to get Thai food for lunch, right? It's just me,
Yo,
and I
that is
I don't
so true.
right, yeah, and I don't get the human presence, right? So when I do these events in person, it's, like, amazing to, like, see actual enthusiasm and connect with those people in a very real and meaningful way, and my wife always says, she's like, "Every time after you do something, you come back and you're, like, energized," you know? Because it's exciting, like, it's so cool to sit down with someone who read a story you wrote and liked it. Like, that's so validating, right? Like,
Mhm.
you put months and months and months into a story and you don't know if it's good. You hope it's good. You think it's good, but you don't know it's good. And then you find someone it connects with. And that is just like it's just like literally get just gasoline in the tank.
Now, how do you decide what part of the stories that you have in your head makes the final cut? Because I know as a writer that you have to have so many different thoughts and ideas about how the story could go.
Mhm.
And how do you make that determination about which of the many storylines or timelines that makes that final cut?
I don't know. I really don't know. I couldn't describe that process to you with any level of accuracy. Other than over the years, I've built a sense,
Mm.
and I sum it up a lot of times when I'm asked that I can basically say that I know that if I'm writing it and I'm excited as I write it,
Mhm.
I'm doing it right. Whatever it is I'm doing, that's the right thing.
Mm.
But when I'm writing it and I get the, mm, if I hesitate, if I'm not completely all in on an idea, that's the stuff that winds up getting the bad reviews down the line or turns
Mhm,
into the
mhm.
dud books. So
Hmm.
I've just built a sense over the years of how to know what's right and what's wrong. And then, obviously there's like the BS answer of, well, I know how to structure a story. It's a three-part act. I have an antagonist and a protagonist. Like, oh, but that's all structure, right? Like that's all anybody can buy, the how to write a storybook and
Mhm.
learn all the different, steps and the pacing and whatnot. And that's just the way that is. But
Now, I
it,
did have a follow-up question to that because you did mention that that is, how you normally do it, but, aren't you starting a different genre of writing? So would that new genre not provide as much excitement?
vice versa.
Oh.
Trying out new avenues of writing is a challenge, right?
Mm.
And trying to put my own personal style and fingerprint
Mhm.
on that new genre is exciting, because it's like it's just cool to try, like and even though I am afraid of failure,
Mhm, mhm.
there's also the excitement that what if people really like it? It's like why we buy scratch
Ooh.
tickets, right?
Mhm,
You
mhm.
go into the 7-Eleven on the corner and you buy a $5 scratcher and you say, "All right, here we go." This is the grand prize is $250,000, right? What are the odds you're actually going to scratch a quarter million,
Right.
right? Like 1 in 500,000 or something like that. So going into it, probably not going to win, but it's fun to try, right? And when I'm writing in a new genre, it's like a safe scratch ticket because
Hmm.
I have enough ardent supporters of me as a writer that I know that they'll just buy it because I wrote it and they know what they're going to get because I wrote it.
Mhm.
Like they know the style of books, they know how I write characters, they know how I write action, they know how I write, intrigue and plot and whatever. And that structure, that style appeals to them. And then whatever genre I throw it in, they're cool with. And I know that I have enough of those people that I can be pretty risky. I can take some risks, and I'm fortunate enough in that. But it's exciting. It's also scary.
Now that makes me think of a risk that my mind just pieced together as you mentioned that. Would you ever, consider that if somebody reached out to you and they said, "I love the material that you're writing. I want to turn it into a game." Would that be
Mhm.
something that you would even consider, or would you say, "Nah, that's the old me. I no."
No, man, are you kidding? I, I probably dream about that stuff. The hope of every writer is that the story that they write gets picked up for TV or movies or um, video games or comic books or whatever other medium that it can jump to.
Mhm.
And yeah, like I would be so excited. It would be just a thrill.
Oh, that's good to hear because if you already do it on the side with your friends or people that reach out to you, there's no telling what your future may hold, especially if you let them know that that's something that you're not completely against. Now, last couple of questions that
Mhm.
these are the juicy questions that I really personally do like. Uh,
Hit me.
so,
Have
like,
some more coffee. Ready.
if you had the opportunity to just, wrap back in time to like 18-year-old you and you had to give yourself a, 5-minute pep talk, what would that conversation sound like?
As an 18-year-old, I had precious little confidence in myself. We moved a lot as a kid growing up. I was always the new kid. I'm a big guy, so I was a chunky kid. And that kind of leveled off in high school. But if I could sit down with 18-year-old Chris, who, just graduated high school barely, I might add, my high school GPA was not much above a 2.
Oh.
Um, I would pull him aside and just be like, dude, like you are talented. You are talented, but you got to stick with it. Whatever it is
Mm,
you want to do, you got to stick with it. And I would just encourage myself to be courageous with my creativity.
mm.
and I had this preconceived notion that I couldn't be creative and make a living at it for a very, very long time. And I think now, looking back, like, well, what if I actually had the guts to try when I was like 20 or
Mm.
25? You
Mhm.
know, like what would my writing career look like if I had an extra decade thrown onto it? Where would I be today if I started writing when I was 24 instead of 34? Um, but it's fun to think about.
Well, that's actually really interesting. And do
Mm.
you think that if you had that opportunity that you would be able to continue, or was it because you never had somebody that was in your corner being that kind of vocal that enabled you to wait a couple more years to start?
I don't know. That I don't know. My friends were very supportive of my creativity, because like
Mhm.
we were gamers, right? And we
Yeah.
played a lot of D&D, and they were like, "Dude, you tell a great story." And my buddy Joe was the guy who really pushed me to take my writing to that next level and try to write a book. And he's an old school gamer from when we were growing up. And my friends believed in me, but my family, they just didn't. No one in my family at the time was creative.
Hmm.
They all worked assembly lines, or they had office jobs, or most of us hadn't gone to college, and we were very blue collar. And the idea that I could do anything that wasn't like that was just completely unthinkable. Not only was it not possible, it just wasn't even on the table as an option to think about. And
Hmm.
yeah, I don't know, but here I am now.
And you're doing a great job. Now, last couple of juicy questions. So, you mentioned that your favorite part of the writing process is when you meet with people face to face at conventions. Do you have a favorite memory of something that might have happened?
Oh
Something
God,
somebody might have said, uh, anything, any signing, anything that might have happened that just makes you think, "This is why I write."
there have been a few. Um, One of the most inspirational things that ever happened to me at a convention was when I went as a fan to a horror convention near Boston, called Rock and Shock, which isn't around anymore. But I got to sit down with George Romero,
Hmm.
which is the grandfather of the zombie genre. Night of the Living Dead, Day of the Dead, Dawn of the Dead, all that. And he was like, I idolized this guy. Like I saw
Mhm.
every one of his movies. I thought they were amazing. I thought he was decades ahead of his time. And he was like so nice. He was like grandpa, like I sat down with him and like we shot the shit for 5 minutes, and it was like
Oh, wow.
sitting down with grandpa, except he was jazzed about zombies like I was. And that was just life changing. Because it showed me that he was just a guy who did it. He like sat down with his friends and they said, all right, let's make a movie, screw it, and ran up their credit cards and borrowed money from their friends, and
Oh,
they
wow.
shot the movie in a house that was getting torn down a week later, and they had like
Mhm.
4 days to film this whole movie. And I said, dude, I could do that. Like I could be creative, like I could just
Wow.
try, right? So
Right.
that was a hugely inspirational thing for me. And as far as when I was attending as like a celebrity, one of the coolest things, and it's happened a few times now, is connecting with an online fan that I've never met before, but I talk to a lot.
Mm.
Because, people who don't, you know, MMO people understand, because I am blood brothers with people that I have played with for years online. Like I would, if they called up and said, hey, I'm in trouble, I'd figure out a way to help them,
Mhm.
because you just spend so much time with them in the virtual world that they
Yeah.
become much more real.
Mhm.
Um, and going to shows and connecting with some of those people have been just like just really awesome, because you finally meet them, and often they are who they were online. And that's just really cool, because now they're not just a name you see on an IM. They're not
Yeah,
an
yeah.
email you get every once in a while. They're not posts about their cats. You go out to dinner with them, or you have a drink or whatever. And that to me is really cool, because I'm not collecting just a career. I'm collecting a community built around my writing.
Mm.
And that sounds kind of cheesy, but I am.
You are.
I have a fan club. There's like 1,000 people in my fan club, and that's really cool, you know, and they talk to each other. And the only reason why they talk to each other is because they read my books. And knowing that I was in some way instrumental in other people connecting and forming a community and doing something is just like, it's just really, really neat. Um, yeah. And like, I had a rando meet and greet down in Houston
Mhm.
6 years ago, 7 years ago, and had no idea what to expect. And one of my local fans there was like, "Hey, you know, I'm gonna set this up for you because you're coming through town." Again, it was an online buddy
Yep.
and huge supporter. And they had a friend who had a bar in Sugarland right outside of Houston. And they told the bar owner like, "Hey, I got an author coming in. He's, you know, pretty well known, might get 5-10 people, but, you know, can we just have a few tables set off to the side?" And then, you know, they're like, "Yeah, sure." It was on a Tuesday, whatever. And we had like 40 people show
Yeesh.
on this like random night. And like the bar owner was like, "What the hell?" You know, like, like this place is dead now, it's packed. And it was just a really, really, really affirming experience, right? Because I was expecting 3 or 4 people, like the people
Mhm.
who I knew who lived there.
Right.
And all of a sudden it just like these strangers kept walking up to me and being like, "Oh, we read your book a couple of years ago. It was so cool. I brought it. Can you sign it?" Yeah. Who the hell are you? Like, how did what? You know, like, and it's just like it kept happening and happening and happening. And 4 hours later, it was just like you see this like fingerprint that you left on the world, and it's just it's so much bigger than, you know, I thought I was. Um, so those are, you know, with conventions and appearances, those are the stuff that like sticks with me, and it's why I keep wanting to go, because I know it happens enough that like if I just hold an event, it's going to be amazing. Doesn't matter how many people show, I'm going to be jazzed about it.
Yeah, yeah. Oh my goodness, that sounds so exciting, honestly. Like, and I know you have a whole lot more because you're getting super excited just thinking about all those memories. And wow, that's super, super intriguing to know. And to know that you started off with gaming, with
Hmm.
just writing lore, with just balancing games, with just
Hmm.
posting consistently on forums, and you go now to a convention and people want you to sign the material that you created by yourself, and
Hmm.
having assistance, by volunteers, but still ultimately you're by yourself writing day in and day out as much
Hmm.
as you can. And now you have other people that read your work. Now, last few questions might not be as exciting, but I do want to know, because you've written so much in so many different genres, do
Hmm.
you have like a specific baby, quote unquote, or a favorite book that you've written, or a favorite character, or are they all just equally alike for you?
Oh no, some are trash. Um, just
Oh, man.
just being real with that. The, so when I was working for the company, doing game development, in my side time, I was developing a world for a role playing game.
Mhm,
Could have been an MMO, could have been a tabletop, and you know, in my spare time, I just kept working on it and building the lore for this world and building the mechanics and creating the setting and drawing maps and all that stuff. And when I left, it was mine. I created it and it was mine. And after becoming a writer, I wrote a series of books set in that world. And it's a trilogy. It's called the Kinless Trilogy, and the world is called Almoran. And the books weren't great. They were some of the first books I wrote. And, you know, looking back on them now, you know, 10 odd years later, like, oh man, those could have been a whole lot better, huh? Um, and they don't really sell that well. It's kind of a weird thing, and I didn't know how to sell them, and the covers weren't that great. But those are my babies, like, because they actually were born back in 1998,
mhm,
you know, 12 years before I started writing, really. And I put so much work into creating the world
mhm.
that those books are in. Like I forget the exact number, but I have something like 300,000 words of just setting text
Wow.
that aren't, like, no one will ever see it, but I used it as the structure to write the books. And
Like, outside the book?
oh yeah, yeah,
In the
yeah.
development?
Yep. Oh yeah. Yep. And
Wow.
by comparison, 300,000 words could be 4 or 5 novels of just raw like world building. So those are my babies. As far as my favorite character goes, the main character that I'm most well known for, Adrian, is by far and away my favorite character. And I have a bunch of characters I really like, but Adrian is, for all intents and purposes, Adrian is me through a filter. So
Mm.
I can just be me and just write whatever comes to mind and just be authentic, and people dig it, right? So like I have a very special affinity for him.
Wow, that's so intriguing. Like, oh, okay, you threw me off with that first statement. Uh, but last question that I do have is, if you weren't a writer, if you weren't a game developer, what profession could you see yourself in?
One of two. I worked after leaving game development. I went back to school and got a new bachelor's degree in psychology. And for about 10 years, I worked as a counselor for kids,
Mm,
basically at a treatment facility, helping kids who were unsafe to be home kind of get their lives together and sort out their issues and get therapy and help for their problems. And I was good at that. I knew I was good at it when I was doing it, and it was tough to leave because I enjoyed doing it. It was a really hard job, but I enjoyed it, and I knew I was making a difference in kids' lives. But I left to be a writer, so I left one great thing to try and do another great thing. So um, if I wasn't writing, I could absolutely go back in and do that. And what's interesting, if you want to keep talking about gaming, is I ran therapy games at this treatment facility, role
what?
playing game. Yeah, seriously, role playing games. And we would sit around the table, and I would have 5 or 6 kids playing Dungeons and Dragons with me,
Oh my
and
god.
I would make adventures that had goals that these kids needed to achieve in their therapy, and their characters would sort of by proxy achieve those goals without them feeling like they were going to therapy, right? And they were having fun. They were rolling dice, and their barbarian was um, smashing a goblin's head. But the big picture was is he was helping his friend, and he was trusting people. So I could definitely go back and do that. And I minored in criminal justice.
Mhm.
Kind of by accident. Like I didn't intend to, but when they send you the slip of paper that's like, hey, you're about to graduate. What do you want to say your degree is in? And they show you all the classes you took, and then
Yeah.
like how close you are to checking off all the boxes for a major or a minor. And when they sent me that, it was like, hey, if I just take this one more class, I can have a minor in criminal justice too. Ah,
Yeah.
screw it. Like might as well get a minor in something. And I actually, one of the jobs that I was offered when I got out of school was as a state trooper here in New Hampshire. And I had accepted the offer, even though I didn't really want to be a cop, uh, because it was working at the state mental health hospital. So
Ooh.
I was going to be working with like some pretty truly dangerous psychiatric patients, but it just sounded cool that like I was going to be in this place and I was going to help keep these people safe. And I'm level headed, I'm calm, I don't freak out, I don't really panic. And I just thought it would be like a really neat position to kind of help people who really needed help. But I wound up taking the job working with kids, and it worked out for the best. So
Wow, that is really cool. I'm glad you did, because I think you provided not only a relief for them, but you helped yourself as well continue your dungeon mastering as well as your storytelling. It's no wonder that you're such a great storyteller, because it sounds like you've been continuously just honing and fine tuning that skill set for many, many years. And once again, I thank you so much for taking the time out of your day, joining me, giving us some of your amazing backstory in regards to how you became an author. If you
thank you.
ever did, if you ever did become a video game or anything like that, that is going to have to be a part of, like, I started this by playing games, doing forums, and just, oh,
Yeah.
just an amazing story. I appreciate you. I appreciate everybody that commented on there. Just so that we have an opportunity to read some people's comments. You've been very impactful for other individuals. Mike Jackson, says thanks for having the number one Zompack author in the world on. Some people, like you mentioned, just hate you for absolutely no reason at all.
Mhm.
Consistency is a skill that has to be learned to do anything.
Mm.
And she even said it's true that sometimes she just pre-orders just because your name's on it, as you mentioned. Um, and Anthony mentioned that you have made a significant difference in his life. So you're doing something good, even though it might feel in the moment that it's not doing anything. There are people that are being impacted by your works. So kudos to you. I hope you keep
Thank
it
you.
up. Thank you so much for putting blood, sweat, and tears, your sacrifice, whether it's a dud, whether it's a bestseller, you're doing something that alleviates people's pains and sorrows. So thank you once again. And once again, let people know where they can follow you, where they can support you as an indie author, and all
Thank
that
you.
good spiel.
So any of the social networks, you just plop in Philbrook author and it'll come up, or you can just put my regular name in, Chris Philbrook, and the algorithm will point you to my places. And if you're interested in looking up the books specifically, you can go online to Amazon or Barnes and Noble and just drop my name in, Chris Philbrook, and it'll give you my backlist. And if you want to go to a bookstore, you can just walk into the bookstore and see if they have my stuff on the shelves. And if they don't, they can absolutely order anything for you. And again, you can always find everything. My central hub is my main website, and that's thechrisphilbrook.com. So
Well, you heard it from here, and you heard it from him. Other than that, I wish you have a fun and productive rest of your night if you're going to continue working. And if not, I hope you have a great rest of your night sleeping.
thank you, sir.
All right, take care and be safe. And if
You
you guys like that interview, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you go to the library and they don't have it, make sure to ask the library to plug you in to his
too.
material as well.